I guess now. Okay, so again, that's the equation that we saw above. So how would you find the y-intercept?
Set t equals 0.
Yeah, to find the y-intercept, so think about, so I've got this piece of paper right here just in case I need to demonstrate something or show some work. Think about just any graph, right? The y-intercept is right there when x equals 0. Okay, so that's why you're plugging it in. So look, plug 0 in for all of the x values, or all the t's in this case. So 0 squared times negative 16, that's 0. Plus 64 times 0, 0. Plus 32. So what is the y-intercept? 32. So the way you would want to write that is, so for g, you'd want to write when x is 0, or when t is 0, y is 32. And then what does the y-intercept mean in this case? It's actually representing something. So what does that t and that h represent?
How high it started.
Yeah, how high it started. When time was 0, right? When you still had the rocket in your hand, where was it at, right? 32 feet high. When time was 0, it was 32 feet high. Okay? So that's h, writing that out however you want. That's what it means. Okay, so I gets a little bit difficult. How long was the arrow in the air? What are you looking for?
The roots.
The roots, right? So here it is. Here's our little drawn up example right here. It flies up, it starts at 0. It flies up from there, then it comes back down, and it hits right here. That's when it's at time. We don't know the time. That's when the height is 0. Okay. So this root actually doesn't matter. So when we find the roots, one root's not going to matter. The negative one is talking about negative time. Okay? The positive one's the only one that's going to matter. So finding the roots, again, we're going to be setting the equation equal to 0. So here's the equation up here. Set that equal to 0. So set the height equal to 0. So 0 equals negative 16 t squared plus 64 t plus 32. Would it be the same thing as C? C asks, when is the arrow 32 feet? The difference is, this one, the height's 0, right? The other one, the height's 32. All right, so solving this, you can attempt to factor it, but you're going to find that you can't factor that. All right? So at least it's not going to be an easy one to factor. So I'm going to start off, use the quadratic formula. I'll write it out first. So negative b plus or minus the square root, and again, if you're ever going to use the quadratic formula, just set it equal to 0. But plus or minus the square root of b squared, so that's 64 squared, minus 4 times a times c, all of it over 2 times a. And if I remember from the other classes, this is a pretty ugly answer. It's like negative 0.45 and positive 4.45. Okay? So anyway, as I discovered earlier today, you guys are really struggling with doing this algebraically. So, just plug the whole thing into the calculator. So here it is. Let's just go ahead and remember, start off with that fraction, because the quadratic equation is just a big fraction. So I'm going to do negative 64. Let's just do the plus. Plus the square root of 64 squared minus 4 times a, which is negative 16, times c, which is 32, all of it divided by negative 32. Okay, so when I press that, that's the positive, all right? It should be negative 0.4 something, negative 0.45, all right? And that's actually the answer, all right? Now, again, Tim, this is what I was showing earlier. I think you had a question about it, so I'm just going to show you one more time. From here, instead of retyping that whole thing, press up, right, just highlight this thing, press enter, and it duplicates it for you. Okay? Just come over here, and instead of having the positive, make it a minus, or 4.45, right? And those are the two answers. So x equals, so my two answers from here, so x equals negative 0.45 or positive 4.45. And this positive one, that's when it's actually hitting the ground. Does that make sense? Remember, the negative one is talking about negative time. Are there any questions on that, guys? You got it? Okay. So that's,
Well, if you weren't to use the calculator, how would you do it?
if I wasn't to use the calculator?
Wouldn't you just do the formula like normal? Yeah, but then I get.
Oh yeah. You'd just do the formula. I mean, you'd have to do it. I mean, by hand, multiply all this stuff out.
But we don't.
Takes a long time.
But we don't have to go to the decimals. But we just write it the way it is, right? I got left with negative 64 plus or minus the square root of 6064 all divided by 32.
I mean, instead of like doing that here, I'll show you how to do it separately. I mean, that just takes forever, man. It would. Without a calculator, I mean, 64 times 64 minus 4 times negative 16 times 32 divided by negative 32, right? All that junk. Wait. Without a calculator, take the square root of it first. You know, like, I mean, seriously, it would be tough.
Like without graphing it, not without the calculator.
All right. Well, hold on a second. Hold on. So these are the roots. That's also the answer. That's the answer to J. And then what do the roots represent? Well, the negative one doesn't represent anything. The positive one represents when the rocket is actually going to come back down, or it's an arrow in this case. It's going to come back down and hit. And then, will the arrow ever reach 98 feet? No. Okay, the maximum height from earlier on, that we already solved it. We got the vertex was 2, 96, so the maximum height was only 96 feet. Okay? You guys got it algebraically? The first part, honestly, was the difficult part. Do y'all understand the second part?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Go ahead and try to finish up those 3 questions that you were started on, or the part of a question that you started on a second ago. And